what I know is if I'm pro kids, that means that I'm human, that I'm treating those kids as human and our potential futures. Because if you don't treat them well, mold them positively, infuse them with compassion so that they don't go back out and commit crimes again, that means you're ignoring and neglecting your future because those kids are going to be our future.
And welcome back, folks, to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David, and today I'm here with Moji Taiwo. Did I say that right?
Yes,
All
you
right,
got it.
Moji. All right, I got it.
You
Excellent.
got it.
I got it. Moji, so just looking at your profile, you have your own podcast about it's literally called the Immigrant Experience. So you deal a lot with the immigrant experience, literally. And I know you have a strong interest around that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, well, let me give you the floor for 30 seconds. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone listening to this podcast today?
Hello, everyone. My name is Moji Taiwo, as David has just said. I'm a retired civil servant. I am an author. I'm a host of a show called the Immigrant Experience Show. I'm a community leader. Um, I am a mother, grandmother of three boys, and a mother of three children. Yes, and I've been in Canada. I came to Canada in my late teens alone, and that was over 45 years ago.
Mm.
So it's been a while that I consider myself a true Canadian. Mhm.
Yeah. So, I, I'm a family of I come from a family of immigrants as well. I think I asked you about that. I'm second generation, right? I'm born here. My parents immigrated here when the first Trudeau was in power
Yes, that's
back
when
then.
I came too.
Yes, yes. So the first Trudeau was in power at the time, and there's during that time there's a lot of folks like yourself and my parents who came here for a better life. But I guess what drove you to come to Canada at the time?
Well, that's a question that I get all the time. What drove me was coming from a country. I came from Nigeria, and it's a member of the Commonwealth country, which Canada is, right?
Hmm.
And for a young person like me who is looking for better opportunity to educate myself, and coming from a family of eight children, and me being number seven, the uh, the affordability of education for my parents by the time I came along was very slim because
Mm.
my parents were older by that time.
Yep.
So if I wanted that education, I had to go out and get post-secondary education by myself. I was
Mm.
given the foundational education, but to get post-secondary education, I had to do it myself. And what better way to get that by applying to Canada as a domestic worker?
Mm.
So I came to Canada as a domestic worker so that
Okay.
I can work in order to finance my post-secondary education. And that's how I got here.
Wow. And so when you came to Canada, you're a domestic worker and you went to school at the same time, I presume?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
And,
yes.
and what did you study?
I had to, I work in the hospital cleaning really
Mm.
while I was taking classes to upgrade or to bring my English and social studies to find out about, the social fabric of Canada and
Mm.
Canadian history in the evening while I work during the day. So that allowed me to further my education in journalism. So I
Mm.
was actually in a radio broadcasting and journalism program.
Mm.
That's what I studied initially.
And did you ever do anything in radio broadcasting?
I worked briefly at a radio station in Lethbridge called CJOC. But of course, in 1981, um, a small city in southern Alberta was not used to somebody who looks like me or sounded like me on radio. So that was very short lived,
Okay.
which propelled me into greater heights.
Let's talk about that since you're,
Mm.
and I think it sounds like a lot of those early experiences propelled you to, what you do now and what you have done as well. Um, I do want to ask you about like this show that you do about the immigrant experience. So you have a podcast about that. What, what do you, what is, what is that all about? Who do you talk to, and what makes it important?
So the Immigrant Experience Show came about my lifelong passion for telling stories. That's why I went into journalism, into broadcasting in the first place. But I was denied that opportunity, but the passion has always been there. And I've used that training that I got through my education in other areas, even when I was working with young offenders. I was able to present to the kids clearly and was able to relate and connect with them, which made a lot of my work much easier for that over 3 decades of working with kids. So when I retired, I decided, what was I going to do with my time? I decided to write a book. And then when I wrote the book and I thought, okay, this is still in line with my initial passion of storytelling. So, hence, I went back to my first love of telling people stories. So, the Immigrant Experience Show now evolves around first and second generation immigrants
Mm.
who I find the same way I found you or you found me, whichever way. And then I tell their stories of their challenges, their successes, their inspiring stories, and where they came from, how they navigated the new system, their new countries, education, immigration, businesses. Yeah, that's what the show is all about. It's telling successful immigrant stories, but weaving through their journeys,
Mm.
having a glimpse into the challenges they faced and how they overcame those challenges.
So the immigrant experience. So if you were to summarize some of your experiences, and I guess like what was what was impressive to you about Canada when you came here, but also what, I don't want to use the word disappoint, but what surprised you about coming to Canada?
What surprised me about coming Canada at the time was how little Canadian knows about the rest of the world. We look to our southern neighbors.
Yeah.
Their case is even worse.
Yep.
But what surprised me the most was how little and how sheltered Canadians were
Mm.
about the rest of the world, and the reactions, the questions that people ask of the time. I must say that we're getting better. Canadians are getting better because a lot of people are coming here now, and
Mm-hmm.
Canadians are also traveling to other parts of the world. So globalization, the benefit of globalization is that we're actually getting to know each other as
Mm-hmm.
humans,
Mm-hmm.
not as one race being superior to the other.
Yeah.
So that's changing. But that was the most shock for
Yeah.
me when I
And this is
came.
the 45 years ago when you came
That
here,
was
right?
45 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My parents have similar stories
yeah.
where there were Chinese people, and but the ones who were here at the time, a lot of them were older. I mean, there was some younger folks, but a lot of them were the older folks, and they were here. Geez, there was probably a handful that were who built the railroad back in the
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
who were left over, but the older men, specifically the older men, were, the ones that are left over from the early 1900s, where there was a Chinese Exclusion Act in Canada, shameful
Mm-hmm.
part of a history,
Yes.
where they were not allowed to bring their families over. The men who were working over here could not bring their wives or kids or anyone over, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was a clearly racist policies of
Yeah.
shameful part of the Canadian past that people
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about. But yeah,
It's
it was very
unfortunate.
homogenous at the time.
It's unfortunate that there is an element of that going on now. I bet a little bit refined.
Hmm.
So, we have human resources shortages, workforce shortages,
Yeah,
and we have people coming to do that work that we need to
yeah,
live comfortably as Canadians.
yeah,
But at the same time, if anything goes wrong with the system, who do we blame first?
yeah, yeah. The person who
It's
speaks
those
differently.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
It's. I mean, I was just talking about it with one of my friends earlier this week, and he saw something in the news about the immigration, and he reacted to it.
yeah.
And I was poking fun at him. I was like, "Do you really want to get angry right now?" We were about to go out with some friends, but it really is. There is a history here, and this is my personal experiences, but my experiences is that, yeah, like I've been in, this is bad, but I've been in taxis where the individual I'm talking to, I go, we start talking, and you realize they were a cardiac surgeon back where they came from, and honestly, like I, I don't think this, cardiac surgery really differs that much from country to country. It's the
Yeah.
same human body.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, we don't necessarily offer a path, right, to utilize those skills when you come to
Mm-hmm.
Canada. And it's some of it might be protectionist, and I don't know. I don't know enough. I guess, like, do you have a point of view on that? Um, you
Well,
know,
I believe that any profession or professional should be brought to Canadian standards.
hmm
I truly believe that. But make the pathway smoother. Don't don't put so much obstacles in the way that they give up and then they lose the hope. Because when they do that, we as a community, as people, we lose. We all lose when we
yeah,
lose those people.
yeah. Well, what's the incentive to come here then, right? Um,
That's right.
what's the incentive? I get it. Do you have an
Be-
example? Oh, sorry,
because they
Moji.
have to qualify. They
Mm,
have to admit qualification on
mm,
their application to
okay.
come here. They have gone through the classification and they've been approved. There is a
Huh.
grading system for them to come here. They don't just apply and the gate is open.
Hmm.
So if they have gone through those qualifying stages and then they get here and then you put roadblocks in the way.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I guess you have any stories around that you're open to sharing, like from your
Well,
show.
I won't even go to those high level professions. I would say people that have been nurses, people that are in healthcare, that they use those skills and those education to qualify to get here.
Hmm.
And they get here, they don't get hired on the levels where they're supposed to be hired. So they had
Hmm.
to go back to working at care homes,
Hmm.
doing, care work and not being given full-time positions.
Hmm.
So they are forced into working at two, three different places in order to make full-time hours.
Hmm.
And we saw that gap. We saw that example at the onset of the COVID
Hmm.
pandemic,
Hmm.
where nursing homes are being blamed for spreading COVID because they're working from one institution to another,
Hmm.
rather than thinking these are people that are sacrificing their lives in order to take care of our loved ones
Hmm.
that we put in nursing homes.
Yeah. Yeah, there was it's unfortunate during the pandemic. It seems like everyone was locked in their homes and had nothing else better to do,
Yeah.
and
But
so
if these people had
yeah.
been given full-time positions, they
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have to do three jobs
Yeah.
to make ends meet.
So I guess what do you see then as a pathway, right? Or at least to start, like you're saying, taking down some of these obstacles. Like, what are some of these obstacles that we could start looking at as, did I guess it's the federal government we're looking at, right?
Well, actually, it's all of us.
All of
It's
us.
all of us. There's an article that I reshared on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, on my profile on LinkedIn. And the article basically speaks to the fact that employers, corporations, small businesses, governments need to hire immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't give people an opportunity, you don't really know what quality they bring to your organization. You don't know what they have to offer. So it's basically opening that door, at least to get to know that immigrant person
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
what they have to offer.
Okay.
So I know I would like to believe it's still not happening here, but my own personal experiences looking for work or seeking promotion in those days, um, I was always second
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't write me off completely. They will always come back, oh, you did so well, but you are second.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that I was second, I knew that I was better than the person they hired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Geez. So I guess like some of the stuff that you do then, right? You spend a lot of your time now. You said like you're retired. I still want to dig into what you did when you were working, but so what are you doing nowadays apart from your podcast? Like what sort of things are you doing to build this awareness and advocating for the things we just talked about, like small businesses? Everyone needs to play a part in helping build the society of like, well, I mean, we're a melting pot here, especially I'm in Toronto. It's a melting
Mm-hmm.
pot. I take it for granted, Moji, that it's just like here's the best example. My kids, the school they go to, and you could just see it's not any one culture, one color, or anything, and they get to learn about each other. And I take it for granted, but I know that's not true for most of our country, or even and quite frankly, any country. So I'm just curious, like, what do you do nowadays to help build this awareness and advocate for it?
I'm a speaker, so I speak at every opportunity I get in schools, in community events, organizations, and I visit schools to read. Well, some of my books, the children's book I have for this month here, I have reading, as reading commitment for kindergarten to grade 3 classes and from grade 4 to 6. And then I speak at assemblies to older kids
Mm,
on, you know, acceptance, on being curious about the other person. Because generally speaking, humans, we make assumptions
mhm,
about the next person, but it takes less effort to actually ask the other person questions so you get to know them. Then it takes away all those assumptions that we make, that we base fear around. So I do a lot of that. I teach life skills classes
mhm,
to young people and young adults. I teach parenting skills to parents and especially immigrant parents on how
mm,
to help their children, integrate into the Canadian school systems and how to just foster excellence. in the children. And for the parents too, when they do that, they have peace of mind, knowing that their kids are in good hands when they go to school. So I do all of those.
Well, so you stay busy. I think it sounds like a full-time job that you have there.
Some people say that I do more now than when I was working professionally.
Let's
But
talk
my
about that.
time, but my
Yeah.
time is my time now, and I'm flexible. So
Well, it sounds like you're doing something you're extremely passionate about.
yes,
I do want to talk about, like, you spent over 30 years working for the Alberta Justice and Solicitor General, and I think you said you were working in correctional facilities, right? Um,
yes,
Very interesting. Where, and this is also the other theme of this podcast, is leadership, and I think you're trying to teach a lot of young troubled individuals who are trying to find their way. um, you're coaching them, you're teaching them, you're trying to lead them in the right direction, and I could see how a lot of that work is informs how you work with the community now. What an interesting background you have, and can you talk more about that and help everyone understand what did you do, and what are some interesting stories about that, working in that?
so this is, I'm gonna take you back a little bit. Remember, I
Mm-hmm.
work in radio station, and I said
Mm-hmm.
it was short lived.
Yep.
So the disappointment there propelled me to go back to university.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went back to the university, I got a degree in social justice and juvenile delinquency, which led me to working with Solicitor General and Justice, Young Offender Branch.
Mm-hmm.
So the Young Offender Branch led me into a correctional facility. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how I got into working with kids.
Okay. And I guess, like, in these correctional facilities, like, what sort of kids are there? Like, what, in terms of, like, what are they there for? What did you see? And how did you help them?
Okay. So I started with a institution. It's a open custody institution, which means we held kids there, but there are no locks on the door, no bars on the window. So I started there. Then I moved into what we call in between transitional housing, group home. I was there for a few years and then moved to what we would call the maximum security facility for young offenders.
Mm-hmm.
We had kids from ages 12 to 18, 19. And at the time, they range from offenses from shoplifting to murder. And over the years, as the Young Offenders Act gets refined and gets upgraded, we decided, also with input from people that are working the institution, the government decided that kids that shoplifted didn't need to be in jail. Kids that committed vandalism in schools didn't need to be in jail.
Mm.
Kids that were victim of their own circumstances. Because I remember in my early years, I work mostly with girls on the girls unit and young kids, young boys. We would get girls that were picked up for prostitution. And these girls, no kid, I believe that no kid was born to be bad. There are circumstances, sometimes beyond their control, that led them to the choices they made. And it was our responsibility, still our responsibility as adults, to guide them and provide them hope and means to be the best that God has created them to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we walk through that, where girls that are picked up for prostitutions are not incarcerated anymore. We gave them opportunity and programs in the community. And it's those adults that are abusing and taking advantage of them, those were the ones that were now being charged and health responsible. So I moved from that, then I became a unit supervisor in charge of cases and developing programs and individual case management for the kids in my unit, in my care. So I had staff. And then from that, I went into staff training, training the staff to actually be effective youth workers and helping them to help those kids. And then I went into management. And from management, managing the whole institution when I'm on with my team and on and on.
So one of the things that speaking with leaders and especially like committed, very committed and passionate leaders, and like yourself is it's easy to take on the emotional luggage of the individuals that you care about, and as you know, uh, in your world, it would have been some of these girls that you worked with, and it's also the people who work for you. And I guess I'm always curious, how did you separate some of those emotions, right? And I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories over the years, or were you able to separate some the emotions there from affecting you in a negative way?
It was difficult. It was very difficult, especially at the beginning for me, because remember I said that I came here alone I was in my late teens. And having gone through the rejection from radio into this other field, so when I came in contact with those kids, it was very, very difficult because I didn't have anybody and I saw them as them not having anybody. But we had training and we had access to psychological um, resources because in this institution where I work, there are nurses, there are doctors, and psychologists there. So it actually, the psychological services not only help the kids, it helped me too, because I was able to access them and sort of bare my soul to those psychologists as
Yeah.
to what my challenges are. And there were strict expectations that the moment you leave work, you don't have any contact with those kids outside of workplace.
Yeah.
That was difficult for me. And I
Yeah.
must admit that I crossed those lines from time to time, although my work didn't know. When there was a need for an extra effort to help a child, I crossed those lines
Yeah.
to help them outside of work.
Yeah.
Um, did I regret? No. If I had an opportunity to do, I think I'll do it again. But not crossing in a way that would be detrimental to them or to me or my family.
Yeah.
Because I also started having children while I was doing this work. And then it became even harder because now I'm thinking these are somebody's children. I'm having my own children. I will hope that somebody will be out there looking out for my kids when I'm not around.
Mm-hmm.
And that pushed me. But it's very, very important to separate uh, the emotion, your own personal emotion from the kids you're working with. Because I've seen people who it's led to their breakdown because they didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And it's led to some that have taken unprofessional steps where they've actually moved the kids into their own home in the
Mm-hmm.
community, which created a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. What works for
But
you
but
moves.
but separating your own emotion from this, you have to get help, and
Yeah.
there's help in the facility.
Yeah. Well, that's something that they don't teach you very well, especially as like you're in jobs, like a lot of frontline jobs, the job you were doing, um, jobs like leadership as well, right? There's there's an emotional toll that you can
Oh
take,
yes, oh yes.
and that's and you don't have to be a title of leader per se, but just the type of job you're in can
Mm-hmm.
have an emotional toll, and I think one thing I find is that the way you qualify for the job is, oh, you got all the requirements, the degrees, maybe some of the work experience, but what they don't teach you very well is all the emotional requirements or the soft skill requirements in order to sustain through a career, right? Not just a job, but sustain a
It is,
career
and
where you're dealing with this.
what I saw in my experience is one or two ways. Some people embedded themselves in the emotion and it drained them
Yep.
because we're more or less childcare worker, social worker in a correctional institution. So you're balancing the security, realizing that you're working with some hardcore kids
Hmm.
that have killed people,
Hmm.
but you still have to be humane in your treatment of them.
Yeah.
And then you have the other aspect of the other people who became paramilitary while
Hmm.
dealing with kids. You can't
Yeah.
have it, you can't do the two extremes.
Yeah. You just remind me of a story for like I've had a number of colleagues and friends who were frontline nurses, and this is even before the pandemic, and a lot of them like they quit the profession. This is pre-pandemic, and
Hmm.
one of the questions I asked them, and the common thing I heard was burnout
Yeah.
from the profession. Burnout from like I know I had a friend who worked in the what do you call it, the ICU for children, right?
Mm.
Other ones, they worked in palliative care. Other ones, they worked just, ICU in general. Like they saw the sick of the sick,
Yeah.
right? Either, yeah, hanging on to life or about to end. And the commonality there was burnout. And
Hmm.
they were saying they just couldn't separate the job from their life. And it was making their life absolutely, they're absolutely miserable. And it just makes me think like, then I asked them, okay, so who stays then? And
Hmm.
they said, and this is the scary part. Some of the people who stay were able to cope. They knew how to cope and how to separate the two as much as possible. The other group were individuals who just became very crass, right? And their defense mechanism was almost like, well, just how it is, and I don't care.
Yeah. That.
And they
Yeah.
almost lose. And then you have the other folks who say paramilitary. It's
Hmm.
you lose humanity. You see
Yes.
every individual as the worst and not deserving of you know
Of, of
of
living. Hmm.
yeah, of living. And and by the way, I volunteered in the hospital as in the inner city when I was a teenager, and unfortunately, I saw some things that shouldn't have happened, right?
Mm.
And I didn't say anything. I was a teenager, but treating someone like, yes, the homeless person has come in. They are probably sucking some of the tax dollars out.
Hmm.
But some of the doctors and how they treated these individuals off the street, you're kind of like, hey, don't forget your Hippocratic oath you took. Like, do no harm, and you're here to heal. Yeah, that
Hmm.
guy might be messed up, but he's disturbing
No.
anyone. Yes, tax dollars, but that's not for you to worry about. Your job is to, treat him or her. But I saw some bad treatment of these
Yeah.
individuals, and
And
that's the
that
crassness.
happens. Yeah. Yeah.
They became crass. Everyone was just a patient
Hmm.
with a clinical profile. Let's just do what
Let's
we got to
just
do.
move on. Yeah.
Eject them,
Hmm.
not discharge. Eject them
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
the ER.
Yeah.
So
No.
yeah.
When I left, or before I left, and this is part of that leadership and training. I guess I was labeled a pro kid, that I was pro kids in the institution. So In some people's view, if you're labeled as pro kids and you're working in a correctional institution, that was supposed to be demeaning.
Hmm.
But I wore it with a badge of honor. So when I would be training new staff or new leaders, and they will say, so how do you respond when people say you are pro kids and you are anti staff? And I just explained, I said, I don't know what those people mean by calling me pro kids, but what I know is if I'm pro kids, that means that I'm human, that I'm treating those kids as human
Mm-hmm.
and our potential futures.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't treat them well, mold them positively, infuse them with compassion so that they don't go back out and commit crimes again, that means you're ignoring and neglecting your future because those kids are going to be our future.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it or not.
Yeah,
Mm.
so yeah, so I said I couldn't help those people, but I know who I am, and I know the impact and the effect that I have on those kids, and I can live with it.
Yeah. Wow. Lots of leadership lessons.
Yeah,
from
yeah,
from so so Moji, I am curious now. Like if we can switch gears for a second, um, more about you. And I sent you some icebreaker questions.
yes.
Typically, icebreaker questions are asked up front,
They're
but we
supposed to
we
be in the front.
but so you don't know this about me. I just go with the flow. Sometimes I know you're a planner. I sort. I'm a
Oh, but it,
planner.
it it's good to be authentic too, though.
It felt right to just carry on with what
Yes,
we were talking about.
yes,
Um, but just more about you and some of your thought processes here. And I do wonder, like, for yourself, um, given what you're doing now, you're doing a lot of work in the community, you're doing a lot of speaking and coaching. What what are you trying to double down on, or is there anything you've changed your mind on recently?
with my coaching and community activism, I've always been involved with my community. Even as I was working in institutions and raising my kids, I've been involved in forming many organizations that are still operating 30 years later. So I've always done that. But then in retirement, after the books and everything, many people, young people, have always said you should form a non-for-profit organization so
Mm,
that this you can leave this legacy. And I've always resisted. I've always resisted because maybe because I work in the government for so long. I don't like restrictions. I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. But I changed my mind. Two people called me in one day, and those two people didn't know each other, but they knew me. And they called in the same day and said, have you given it a thought again that you need to form a non-for-profit organization so that you can? So last year, July, I incorporated TMT Learning Foundation. So now I have a non-for-profit. I have some board members that are helping me out.
mhm.
We're at our developing stages, but I'm thrilled to say that in 6 months, 7 months of incorporating that organization, we've delivered two programs already.
Excellent.
And the TMT Learning Foundation and Taisho is now under one roof.
Hmm.
So the Thai show is under TNT Learning Foundation. We've done educational series on immigration and what people need to know. I'm collaborating with subject matter experts in different ways. I we just put a package together of things that we may be doing the rest of this year into next early next year. So that's what I've changed my mind on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And it sounds like you're having a big impact because of putting this foundation together. Like you're able to put all these like these things that you're doing, these programs you're
Yes.
doing,
Hmm.
and almost like directing it towards common audiences and
Hmm.
such.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I am also interested in for yourself, like when you think about younger leaders who are or emerging leaders, I always ask my guests this: like, what advice would you give to someone who is looking at becoming a leader or is a leader early on in their career?
I would say, as a young leader in the making, get to know yourself first.
Mm,
Get to know what you stand for. Get to know your breaking point. Get to know what is it that you're flexible, on, and what you will not go against. You need
mm,
to know your boundaries. Because as a leader, first of all, you need to be flexible. You need to be able to look outside and beyond your own scope.
mm-hmm,
But along the way, you will always meet people who will say, no, you can't do this.
mm-hmm,
But you need to realize that if you are passionate about something and you're meeting resistance, you need to be able to stand up and speak for what you are passionate about.
mm-hmm,
And if it's not going to be achieved through that person, you need to be prepared to go around the person.
mm-hmm. Yep.
You need to be intuitive. When I walk into a room, it takes me a few seconds to read the room,
Mm-hmm,
and I can immediately tell you who will add value to what
mm-hmm,
I stand for
mm,
and who I will not waste my time
mm-hmm.
chatting with.
Yeah.
A leader needs to know that. A leader needs to know that you you are not right. You can't be right all the time.
Mm-hmm,
You should be prepared to step back sometimes, reevaluate, make adjustments, and then move on. A leader needs to know that there are hidden gems in every corner of the world, and you need to be able to identify those gems and lead with compassion. Lead with compassion. You know, um, people people know how you make them feel at the end of the day. So lead. I've met a lot of people that I don't remember, but they remembered me,
mm-hmm.
and they had to remind me where we've met because I also have bad memories. I so yeah. So a leader needs to be honest. Lead with honesty. Lead with compassion. Lead with integrity.
Excellent.
Say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't promise what you cannot deliver.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All comes down to trust there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, last question to you, Moji. And I always leave the last question to my guests to ask me about
Okay.
anything. So I'm going to hand it over to you. What
Eh?
question do you have for me?
What question do I have for you? Um, I know that you have a day job.
Hmm.
What drives you to do this podcast?
Yeah, it's it's something bigger than me. It's so this is a passion project. Like our first time meeting, I said I want to be clear. This is not part of my day job. Nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with my company. This is my passion project. And I think part of it is I've been thinking about it, Moji, like why I'm so passionate about it. It started with the seed was there's all this knowledge I have, and there's a lot of knowledge I know there's in the community, and there's got to be a better way to disperse this. And I love to talk. I love to talk to people. I like to meet people. So the best way to do it is podcast. So that was the seed. But as I'm looking at this, and I'm heading towards 30 episodes now. I'm feeling it's building some sort of legacy, and it's nothing selfish here, but it's some sort of legacy because I've always thought of like what you're saying. What do you stand for? What is important to you? I feel that how I want to be remembered in my career is I am the person who built more leaders. I was a caring leader who built more leaders. And my goal is to make people my peer or above me. And I feel this is one of those vehicles that's going to help do that. And hopefully it's going to be for people I have never met as well. It's going to help them
See,
do
that's
that.
the beauty of it. Your podcast allowed us to meet. Here I
Yes.
am sitting in Calgary, Alberta, and you're in Toronto,
Yeah.
Ontario, and we met.
Yeah. And that has been one of the best unexpected. It's almost like the side effect passion of doing this is that like folks have asked me like, "Hey, nice podcast, and this is great, and what's been good about it?" I'm saying like, yeah, it's actually the people I met,
Hmm.
the unexpected coffee chats that we're having
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
That's been the most amazing. And then because I've met some people like this, I've gone to coffee with some people. And I had another fellow here, Richard, this is like a few months ago, he was on the podcast. When he came to Toronto, he called me up and he said, "David, let's grab lunch." So we grabbed lunch together. And so it's been really good. And everyone's like pure of heart in what they do. They are passionate about what they do. And that's the thread that is very consistent amongst all the people on this podcast is there's an authenticity
Hmm.
to what they're trying to do. It's not to get rich, it's not to be famous. They want to make some difference and leave their communities and the earth or whatever in a better place than it was. And I feel that's my job as well. And yeah, so long answer to a short question.
Well,
Why do I
no,
do
it's
this?
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, I've
Moji.
always say one of my mottos is actually it's on my website is dare to be positive,
Mhm.
dare
Yeah,
to be positively different. Yeah,
dare to be positively different. Well,
yeah.
I'm going to make that the title of this podcast. Dare to be positively different.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Moji, it was a pleasure to speak with you for almost 50 minutes now. Anything else you want to say to the audience out there?
Well, every day you go out, make sure that you touch other people's lives in a
Mhm.
positive way because you never know who will be looking out for you too.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's all
Yeah.
dare to be positively different.
Yes. Yes.
All right, Moji. It's
Thank you
great
so
speaking with you
much,
today.
David, for having me. And I hope that when I come to Toronto, I will check you out too.
You should absolutely, and
Mhm.
vice versa when I
All
go
right.
out to Calgary. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop recording.